Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a decision that, honestly, seems pretty standard on the surface.
Right.
We're confirming that UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is actually going to the UN Climate Summit, Cop30. It's next month in Belém, Brazil.
But, and this is the interesting part, this wasn't just a simple yes. It wasn't a foregone conclusion at all. No, the official word from Downing Street only came out after, well, weeks of pretty intense internal debate, apparently, and loads of public speculation.
Okay, that's what we need to get into today. That's our mission here. Why did this seemingly routine decision, attending a major global conference, cause so much internal struggle? We want to understand the kind of political pressure that's swirling around climate action in the UK right now. It feels intense.
It is, and you have to remember the context for this particular summit, Cop30. Experts, climate specialists globally, they're already saying this could be the most significant climate meeting since the Paris Agreement back in 2015.
Wow, since Paris. Okay, so the stakes are really high.
Absolutely. This isn't just a photo opportunity. It's seen as a crucial moment for global cooperation for the next decade or so.
Okay, let's start unpacking the internal conflict then. Because the reports suggest the initial resistance, the maybe don't go advice, came from inside Number 10.
That's right. His own aides were apparently advising against the trip.
Why?
Well, the main reason cited was the flack he'd already taken, the media criticism about supposedly spending too much time out of the country already.
Okay, that narrative.
And that criticism, you have to see it as reflecting these broader political headwinds. Those internal worries are basically a symptom of what the opposition is hammering on about.
Which is?
Well, the government seems caught, doesn't it? They want to talk up their green plans, but they're also clearly nervous about doing it too loudly because people are genuinely worried about the cost of living, about energy bills going up.
Yeah, that's the perennial tension, isn't it? Framing climate action as just another cost rather than, say, an investment or opportunity.
It's absolutely central to how this is playing out politically in the UK right now, and that cost narrative is being pushed very effectively by the opposition.
From the Conservatives and Reform UK specifically.
Yes, we're seeing increasingly vocal, unified opposition to ambitious net zero targets from key figures in the Conservatives, and perhaps even more significantly, from Reform UK.
So any big international trip focused on climate change immediately gets framed as an indulgence.
Pretty much. Not essential diplomacy, but a leader often enjoying, the perks of the job while people struggle at home. That's the attack line.
The details reported by the Financial Times about the internal calculations are quite revealing. It wasn't about policy merits, was it? It was pure political optics.
It seems so. Aides were reportedly worried specifically about Reform UK voters, saying they, quote, don't think climate is important.
Right. How much sway does a party like Reform UK really have here? They aren't the official opposition.
But they have this perceived influence, maybe disproportionate influence, over a certain segment of voters. Voters Labour feels it needs to win over or keep on side.
So when aides say Reform voters don't think climate is important, what's the underlying message there?
It likely means those voters see climate policy primarily through the lens of cost. Taxes, higher bills, restrictions, things that impact their daily lives immediately.
And Starmer going to Belém.
Exactly. Starmer traveling to, let's face it, a fairly distant and potentially appealing location like Belém to discuss climate just gives easy ammunition to parts of the press.
And we already saw that happening, didn't we? The Mail and the Sun were pushing that angle.
Absolutely. Running stories about him spending, quote, a record number of days overseas.
That kind of coverage must be politically damaging.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Because it shifts the whole debate. Suddenly, it's not about global climate strategy. It's about wasteful spending or elitist travel.
Right. The narrative becomes he's jetting off while your heating bill is going up. Lethal combination.
It really is in the current UK political environment.
Okay, so you've got this significant pushback, fear of losing certain voters, guaranteed negative press coverage, and yet he still decided to go.
Yes.
So the argument for attending must have been compelling enough to outweigh all that domestic risk.
It had to be. And if you look at the official justification that came from his spokesperson, it performs a kind of pivot.
How so?
It moves the focus. It's less about environment first and much more about economics first. The core message now is, quote, net zero is the economic opportunity of the 21st century.
Okay, that's a different framing entirely. From burden to benefit.
Precisely. It shifts it from a necessary sacrifice to potentially a lucrative investment for the country.
And what's the specific promise attached to that?
Well, the language is quite specific. The promise is that going to COP, championing this agenda, will help, quote, reignite our industrial heartlands, create good jobs for the future, and lower bills in the long term.
Right. So connecting climate action directly to jobs in former industrial areas, things like battery factories, green tech, maybe carbon capture.
Exactly that. It's targeting those voters by linking the global climate agenda to tangible local economic benefits, or at least the potential for them.
So the stated goal for attending Cop30 isn't just about the planet. It's very much about positioning the UK as a, quote, global leader on climate action and green growth.
Yes, with the aim of attracting investment and generating those jobs back home, it's a gamble, really.
Hell,
A bet that the long-term economic upside will eventually outweigh the short-term political pain over costs.
which explains why it was such a battle internally. They needed to be sure they could sell this economic angle convincingly.
Absolutely. But that internal debate, that was only part of the story. There was also significant pressure from outside Downing Street pushing him to attend.
Okay, let's talk about those external factors.
Oh.
Because Starmer himself had kind of set a precedent, hadn't he, back when he was leader of the opposition?
He definitely had. He'd invested political capital in this specific issue. He went to the COP in Azerbaijan last year, even before becoming TM.
Right.
And maybe more importantly, remember how he attacked Rishi Sunak in 2023.
Oh, yeah, when Sunak initially hesitated about going to the summit in Dubai, Starmer was pretty critical then.
Very critical. And look, once you've framed not attending as a leadership failure when you're trying to get the top job, it's politically very awkward to then do the same thing yourself once you're actually in power. Consistency matters.
Fair enough. But it wasn't just past statements, was it? There was pressure from environmental groups, too.
Yes, definitely. The environmental movement, and particularly the Green Party, which has seen a bit of a surge in support lately under Zach Polanski.
What did they say?
Polanski was quite direct. He warned that if Starmer skipped Cop30, it would be seen as a, quote, huge abdication of responsibility.
And for a new prime minister wanting to look forward-thinking, letting the Greens paint him as weak on climate, that's not a good look.
Not at all. It carries a political cost.
But perhaps the most interesting pressure came from within his own party, from his MPs. That feels significant.
It does. We saw Polly Billington, the MP for East Thanet, make a really crucial point about the practicalities of these summits.
What was her argument?
She talked about the negotiating process itself. She argued that having the leader physically present focuses the minds of the negotiators on getting the best possible deal.
So the boss being in the room actually makes a difference to the outcome. It concentrates effort.
That's the argument. Having the person who can ultimately make the final call, commit resources, sign off on things, it speeds things up and adds weight to the discussions.
Okay, that provides a solid diplomatic reason to take the domestic political flack. It's not just symbolism.
Exactly. And Billington also explained why that focus is so important right now. She talked about the, quote, fragility of the consensus on acting on climate change.
Fragility of the consensus.
Yeah.
That sounds precarious. What does that mean in practice at a summit like COP?
It means the basic agreement reached in Paris that everyone needs to aim for keeping warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius isn't rock solid. It's constantly being chipped away at by, economic problems, national interests, populist politics that don't favor global cooperation.
So if a major player like the UK Prime Minister doesn't show up,
it sends a signal, doesn't it? It might suggest commitment is wavering. And that can make it easier for other countries to perhaps scale back their own ambitions. His presence is partly about reinforcing that fragile consensus just by being there and leading.
Okay, so if we tie this decision to attend COP30 back to what Labour has actually done since taking office, it starts to form a pattern, right? It reinforces that global leader message.
I think so, yes. They seem to be trying to back up the summit attendance with tangible policy moves beforehand, signaling they're serious.
Like reversing the ban on onshore wind turbines.
Exactly. That sends a clear message, particularly to the renewable energy industry, that the UK is, open for business again in that area.
And what about the economic opportunity angle? Any concrete steps there?
Well, the big one is setting up this new investment body specifically tasked with channeling funds into clean energy projects.
Right.
That really underlines the idea that net zero isn't just an environmental policy. It's central to their economic strategy.
Right.
So going to COP becomes partly about attracting global investment into those new structures they're building domestically.
So putting it all together, the internal arguments, the media attacks, the economic framing, the diplomatic necessity, It seems Starmer is walking a tightrope here.
Definitely. He's balancing these very real, immediate political risks at home voter reaction, media scrutiny, against what he sees as a strategic imperative to be at this crucial global meeting.
The decision to go, then, it's more than just booking a flight. It's a statement.
I think it is. It confirms he's essentially betting that positioning the UK as a leader on climate action, framed as this big economic chance, is the right path, even if it means navigating some very choppy political waters back in Britain. He's chosen the international stage, despite the domestic heat.
So the key takeaway seems to be that this trip to Belém is arguably Starmer's biggest gamble on the world stage so far. It's less about the travel itself and more about driving forward this economic vision, even when it means facing down significant opposition and apparently overruling some of his own initial advice.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a really interesting question, doesn't it? Building on everything we've discussed from the sources, we've seen the political price tag for attending, the internal worries, the press backlash, the Reform UK angle, and we know, as Polly Billington said, that the global consensus on climate is fragile. So given that high domestic cost, how much real, measurable difference does the physical presence of one leader, even the UK Prime Minister, actually make to the final outcome of these huge, complex international negotiations? Is that diplomatic return genuinely worth the political capital being spent at home? That's the question Starmer hopes Belém will answer positively.